And when the Greenbelt was brought in back then, it wasn't like there's some huge study that said this land is precious and it's got this special frog on it, or, you know, waterfront or whatever, and this one isn't. Mm-hmm. They basically just drew a line on the map. It was totally arbitrary.
Mr. Hudak, we are live. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Gary. Nice to be here in Oshawa, hanging out with you, doing real talk.
Yes.
See you face to face, not just that, you know, that melodious voice that comes through so well here on the microphone.
Yes.
Do you sing?
I don't sing. I should.
Yeah.
You know when I do sing? I do sing at Christmas when I've got a couple of drinks in me, karaoke. I'll do it then.
Okay, so I got to get you a couple of drinks and put up a Christmas tree and a wreath.
There we go.
We'll get you singing on the show.
There we go. Right? I think we should do a duet. We got both got nice, deep, bassy voices.
Man, God gave me a mouth and I could talk. It wasn't for singing, and it's certainly not for dancing. So let's not scare away the audience by asking me to perform either one of those tasks.
Well, listen, you know what? God gave you a gift of other things, you know, and that's why I've got you in here today, because I want to talk about a few items that, you know, is on a lot of people's minds right now today, you know, so I think we'll talk about the market and what's happening there. You know, I think one of the big things for people today is it feels like the affordability of getting into their dream home is either slipping away or it feels like it's gone. You know, like, what are your thoughts on that? And I know that they've been implementing a lot of new things like Doug Ford, and, you know, like, do you think these things are going to help? Yeah,
I mean, Gary, you're right. That is the reality. Look, the great thing that made Canada such a fabulous country to grow up in or to move to was that every generation had a better shot at owning a home than the parents or grandparents. That was true from Confederation through the wars, through the 70s and 80s until about 2012. And it started going downhill.
Right.
You're absolutely right. The percent of adults who own a home has actually slipped for 7 years in a row now. And we need to start turning that around. Positive news, I'm optimistic. I'm actually seeing some good choices by government for a change to help create more homes people can actually afford.
Right.
But if we don't, Gary, turn this around now, I really worry that Canadian dream of home ownership is going to slip away from the middle class altogether.
What do you think caused it? Was it I don't know if we would call the artificially low interest rates that we've experienced after the financial meltdown that we had in 2008 in the U.S.? Do you think that's been part of it? Because, I mean, these interest rates have been incredibly low. Has that been part of it? Printing of money? What do you think caused it?
The main driver is we didn't build enough homes.
Okay.
Like, honest to goodness, we did not build as many homes in the 2000s and than we did in the 1970s. Like it's nuts. We built more homes in the 70s than we have in the last good 2 decades. That's despite our population growing. Mm-hmm. That's despite us attracting more immigrants from around the world to Ontario, particularly the greater Toronto Hamilton area. And number 3, the millennials are the biggest generation in the history of our country. They're the largest generation trying to get in the housing market now. They're getting promoted, they're getting married, they're having kids.
Right.
And we actually built fewer homes. So if job number 1, if I were the Premier's office for the day or the mayor, build more homes that average Canadians can afford.
Now, what were the number of homes that we were averaging, and where are we at right now? Like, I think at full tilt, what can we do? 80,000 a year in the GTA? Is that kind of where we're at?
You know what? You got a good guess there. So we should have been building, you know, from about 2000 to 2020, 100,000 homes a year.
Okay.
That would help us, you know, keep up with the millennial demand and people moving from across Canada to Ontario or new immigration. But basically, we were 2/3 of that, probably an average of 60 to 70,000 homes being built.
Okay.
Here's the good news. Big part of my job when my feet hit the floor every morning, you know, helping realtors help people build a great place or find a great place to call home. So advocacy, right? Putting ideas on the table to get those homes built, to bring affordability within reach.
Yeah.
So the good news is the Ford government actually brought in a number of our changes. They brought in new legislation like the Building More Homes Faster Act. And we set 2020, let me think about this, 2021 saw the biggest increase in homes in 30 years. We hit that $100,000 home barrier, and 2022 almost got there. So the good news is some help is on the way. The last 2 years, some more homes built in Ontario. than we have in 30 years.
What would allow us to build more homes? I mean, it's got to be trades as well, too. Like, where do you see the issue, right? Because, you need somebody to frame the home. You need drywallers. You need the shingle the roof. Is that part of the issue as well, too, on top of the immigration?
Not a bad pun here, but you nailed it. I'll get to other causes of the supply dilemma and how we can turn it around.
Okay.
But if we are going to get, so I was put on a panel called the Housing Affordability Task Force for Premier Ford. It was a great honor. Mm-hmm. We put forward a report to say, how can we actually make homes more affordable and build that Canadian middle class? And the number, Gary, is 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years. So 150,000 homes a year. We got to raise the bar to play catch up. You build that many homes, affordability comes within reach. You get more starter homes, more move-up homes. But in order to get there, you are exactly right. We need more skilled trades people to build those homes. They are encouraging more people to do that in high school, to go into the trades. Great. But to tie the two things you just talked about together, when we're bringing new immigrants into Ontario, we need to give more points for those who are in the skilled trades. As you know, it's pretty tough to come in here. There's a point system to get into Ontario. We're really focusing on university graduates and postgraduates. Okay, but we should also give more points if you can be in construction, if you can be in plumbing, if you can be in drywalling. Make sure that the people who are coming to our country to move here and live here have the skilled trades that build the homes they're going to live in.
I never knew there was a point system for that. So based on what they're coming in to do, they will actually get a point system. And what does that do? Does it allow them to speed up for their, Canadian citizenship?
Yeah, exactly right. So, Canada's a great country. So people from around the world are trying to get in here. More people want in than we have tickets, so to speak. So they're rated on a point system. Do you have a university degree, your age, your health? Do you speak English or French if you want to live in a French-speaking part of the country? The more points you get, the more likely you get in. Is the job that you're trying to qualify for one that we don't have enough supply in our province?
Right.
So you get scores, and that helps you get into our country. So the problem is that you don't get extra points if you are in the skilled trades. We've got a screaming need for more people with blue collars that can get things built. Challenge is that's a federal government responsibility, but the provinces are pushing to give more points. We strongly support that. Give more points to people who have talent, the skilled trades builders who are going to build our homes, our hospitals, our roads, or bridges. That's kind of the history of our country too, right? We've built a lot of infrastructure with new Canadians coming in. Let's do it again.
Yeah. My son, he's a welder, and I'm telling you, he will never be out of a job. He could lose his job today and find another job tomorrow. It doesn't seem like a sexy job nowadays, but it's so needed. These trades.
You're talking six-digit salaries, good benefits these days. Like you said, pretty much a guaranteed job in the trades. Look, I couldn't put a nail in straight. I can't draw a stick man with a ruler. I'm hopeless. But I admire those who can. And the fact is, if we want to actually solve our housing affordability crisis, a key part of that, skilled tradespeople who can get homes built soon.
Right. Now, being the CEO of OREA, and talking to realtors and still kind of staying within the framework of affordability and getting into home ownership, what do you see is the issue that a lot of these people that are getting into home ownership is facing? Is it the down payment? Is that the issue? Or is it affordability? Because when you see some of these rent prices, the way that they're moving up, and even the price of homes, what is the biggest issue that you see?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the two biggest things that realtors talk to me about are the affordability crisis, which has now deepened as interest rates have gone up and mortgage rates are higher, so carrying costs are higher. And number two, and we could talk about this later in the podcast if you like, and that's professionalism and ethics, raising the bar there. So with respect to the first part, Gary, they're around the main thing that they run into. Quite frankly, it's not so much the mortgage payment, although they're higher now. It really is the down payment, getting the market in the first place, the financing. Right. So we've given a number of suggestions, along with building more homes. And when you build more homes, you can build more affordability into the system. On the financing side, we believe that you should give more mortgage options, like a 30-year amortization, which we used to have. That's the primary way that younger people used to get into the market.
Well, they used to have 40 years
There you go.
at a very small time in history. I think back in 2007, 2008, somewhere around there.
Well, anything in that direction, right?
Yeah.
30, 35 will be helpful because that's usually the way first-time buyers get into the market. They'll get promoted. They'll make more money. You pay that off right over time or refinance down the road. So that will be a key to getting into the marketplace. That's nationally. We work with Korea, but that's on our target list. Number two, we want to see the land transfer tax waived for first-time home buyers altogether. We did successfully fight for a discount on that. I think up to the first $4,000 is knocked off, but we would like to see that relieved altogether for first-time buyers. As you know, with your success in real estate, Gary, once somebody gets in on the ladder, the first rung, it's easier to move up than get on the ladder in the first place. So we think that would make a big difference for families because you got to have that money at hand. And if you want, I can talk about this too. There are other financing mechanisms that work in other countries that run into barriers here in Ontario that can be removed, kind of like a modern rent-to-own.
Okay, let's talk about that then. So like what, like a co-ownership or? You
got it. So there are in other countries, whether it's US, Australia, United Kingdom, groups of patient money. It might be pensions, it might be investors, or it could be government that would help, that first-time home buyer get into the market. They get a piece of the equity. And in the old rent-to-own days, you would pay on top of that, you'd pay the rent and a payment to get the rest of the equity.
Right. And there'd be like a portion of your payment would be saved towards a down payment, like a credit system.
You got it. Yeah. So that's one model. There's a newer model that basically says they stay co-owners until you sell the home and they get part of the upside, whether that's a 10% share of the home.
When you say co-owner now, we're talking about partnering with the government.
It could be government. It could be an investor. It could be a pension fund.
Okay.
All of them interested in investing because they know the value of a home, increases very predictably over time. So they're interested in getting into the market that way. So let's say that, Gary owned 90% of the home. I'm the investor. I've got 10%. When you sell the home, I get 10% of the proceeds at the end of the day. The problem is our legislation we have was built in the 1970s. They never imagined this kind of financing mechanism. So there would be a landlord-tenant restrictions on this. We would both pay the land transfer tax. Those things don't make any sense. So we should get rid of this old red tape to allow a new financing mechanism to help people get into the market.
Right. And I mean, then I guess it also comes down to then working with the banks and the banks being open to this as well, too.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Any of the financing steps you need to go through have to open their eyes to this new opportunity. But what does it do? It gets more equity, both in the investor and in the homeowner. More people get the keys to a home and finally get into the home ownership business. And there's new financial technologies that we could grow in Ontario or that would come into our province to help make this a reality. It's an exciting development that's shown promise in other countries. Let's open our doors here in Ontario.
Yeah. Now, the other thing as well, too, and this is being recorded March 28th, so I'm going to kind of timestamp this. We're starting to see multiple offers come back in. I'm not sure if you're seeing that, but we're definitely seeing that on the streets. What about these multiple offers and the bidding and also auctions? There's two ways of doing this. Now, do you have a preference over one? Does it, what are your thoughts on that?
My preference is let the consumer decide, whatever is going to work in their best interests. There was a talk, as you might remember, from the Trudeau government to ban the traditional offer process altogether, to basically ban blind bidding and make everything an auction. And here's a problem with that. Number one, we're talking about a homeowner who has put their life savings into their home. Maybe they're selling their home to move up because the kids have gotten bigger or to have dignity in retirement. They really should be in the driver's seat. The government shouldn't tell them they can only sell their home one way. They should have an array of options with proper consumer protections in place. And second, Gary, I've said to my mom, you can't use a realtor that you've always used or grandpa used or whatever. You've got to use an auction. My mom would say, I don't even know how these things work. It's intimidating. How's that process going to impact me? And the likelihood is she would not put her home in the market in the first place. So if we've got an inventory problem today, mandating auctions would make that even worse.
Have they done that anywhere though? Have they mandated? Because I think Australia does auctions. I think New Zealand does auctions.
Well,
have you studied those to see what they've gotten out of it and if it works?
Yeah, and there's a good news story here. So Australia and New Zealand do have auctions. In some of the states, I think they are in Australia. It's 40 to 60% of the market, but it's a choice. The homeowner decides, do I want to use the traditional offer process or do I want to use an auction? So they give them that choice, and it's quite popular there. It's a bit of a different cultural fit. So what we've said to the Ford government was similarly give Ontarians a choice. Bring in this notion of an open offer process. So if Debbie and I are selling our house, we want an open offer process. We go to Gary, our realtor, and he enables that. And then any buyers who come along would similarly be part of that process, knowing that the contents of their offer would be shared with other potential buyers. As long as we go in, eyes wide open, and no confidential information, identifying information can be exchanged. That's part of the new legislation, the Trust and Real Estate Act called TRESA, and that will be coming to reality probably later this year. But it will be an option, a new tool for realtors and a new choice for me as a homeowner. So
it's not here yet then? I thought it was.
So the legislation is passed. We'll go back to Civics 101. So the legislation passed in the House. It was actually supported by all parties. That was a good thing, and good realtor and OREA lobbying that got us there. Mm-hmm. But then think of legislation as a skeleton. You still got to put flesh on the bones. What are going to be the details? So that's called the regulations, and those regulations will be coming out publicly later in 2023 to say, here's the details exactly of how that's going to work. But I'm confident it will be sometime this year.
Right. And I guess the thing with the whole auction piece, and I think you touched on it, is the confidentiality, right? Of knowing when the closing date is, or knowing how much of a down payment they're putting down. Is that where that confidentiality piece comes in with the auction? And that's where they've got to really make sure it's sound?
You got it. Conditions that may be on the property, all that stuff, but nothing that could personally identify any of the buyers. Because I think next to our health information, our financial information is our most precious, is our most private. So nothing that can identify who the individuals are. Mm-hmm. And basically the way the rules are looking as they develop them, Gary, is that the listing realtor would work with the seller to design that process. Are we sharing 2 bits of information, 3, 4, everything? They would design that process, and the buyers would come along and say, okay, I'm interested or I'm not interested.
Right. You know what I wonder, though? I wonder if that would cause, if we go the auction route and somebody decides to do that, I wonder if it would cause any type of a frenzy. When you get caught up in that auction mode and, you've got like people around you and your wife is right beside you. It's like, you better get me this house because it's got this kitchen. That must be a thing. Have they documented that, or have they looked at that in New Zealand and Australia? They must have.
Yeah, great question. And it is a thing. It absolutely is a thing. They call it auction fever. Mm-hmm. Because it's fun to watch, eh? Like sometimes in Australia and New Zealand, they do them online or they do them in person. And you see that guy up against a tree, you don't like the way he's looking, he's not getting that house, and you get a little carried away.
Right.
That's why you need to have a realtor, right? To keep you calm and cool in the pocket, make the right decision for you and your family and your future, and don't get carried away. That's why I always say you should use a realtor when you're buying a home, but it does exist. Some people say, oh, you go to auctions, it'll hold prices down. In fact, quite the opposite. It can actually drive prices higher when that type of auction fever develops.
Yeah, I could imagine for sure, right? So something that, you got to be aware of, right?
I've been there, not with a house, and not because you can't do that for a house. I think this will be the first time in North America it'll be allowed in this new legislation. But I remember being at some charity auctions with my wife, and there's some painting on the wall, right? You get all carried away. You want to support the auction. You don't want your buddy to beat you. You pay way too much for a painting that I kind of never went on the wall in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. What about the green belt? That's been a topic that a lot of people have been talking about, removing the 7,400 acres. What's happening with that? What are your thoughts around that? Because it's not that they're just taking it away. Aren't they replacing it, I think, with 9,400 someplace else or something like that?
You got it. Man, I go back on the green belt to, let me think about this, 2008, I think.
Okay.
So 2008, I think when the legislation was brought in, and I was, believe it or not, the municipal affairs and housing critic for the PCs in the Ontario legislature. And I represented West Niagara. John Tory was our leader. There's a little trivia question. He was a leader at the time, so he put me in charge of this file.
Yep.
And when the Greenbelt was brought in back then, it wasn't like there was some huge study that said this land is precious and it's got this special frog on it, or, waterfront or whatever, and this one isn't. Mm-hmm. They basically just drew a line on the map. It was totally arbitrary. So I'll give you an example. In my riding in Grimsby, there's actually a property that was surrounded by development. They had servicing under the ground ready to go, and it was declared a greenbelt. and that land could not be developed. And it was not environmentally sensitive by any means. So what the government is doing now is they're saying, okay, let's look at a piece of land like that. It's actually included, that's surrounded by development, is not environmentally sensitive, and build some homes on it for the middle class. But for every acre we take out, we're putting 1.3, 1.4 acres back into the green belt that is environmentally sensitive. So at the end of the day, you get more homes people can afford, you increase the size of the green belt, and you improve its quality by putting in land that's environmentally sensitive as opposed to land that should be developed.
See, now you don't hear that on the news.
No.
Well, like, why? Why not? Because you have to dig to find that.
I know.
Because they made it sound like as if they're completely taking it away. But then if you do a little bit of research, oh, hold on a second. No, they're actually replacing it and they're moving it someplace else. Now, I guess the question is, where they're moving it, that could be the concern, right?
Yeah, sure. And I guess you look over that, but the legislation was written to allow the boundaries to change as long as you put an equal or greater amount back into the green belt. So that is actually what is happening. Why does nobody hear about that? There's that old expression that bad news travels around the world before good news gets its pants on, right? It's just human nature. But if you dive down to what happens here, the green belt actually increases, the quality improves with more environmental land, and you can take some land like I talked about and turn it into houses people can buy.
Yeah, I think that's the important piece there, right? So what about the foreign buyers ban for the next 2 years? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it will help with the housing?
No. No. Look, I was in 21 years in politics. I get the popularity. This would probably pull at 75, 80%, I think, popularity, because people want to believe that it's, foreign investors snapping up all these properties and my daughter can't get a house. The reality, I think because Gary, you watch the market closely and give the advice to your clients, it's usually like 2 or 3% of the market. There has been no uptick in foreign buyers in Ontario in the last number of years. It's held steady around that number. It's not the cause of the problem. I get the politics, but I can tell you from all my experience in government, there's only so much time in the day to get things done, to actually motivate the bureaucrats to go out there, develop a program, and execute on it. And I would much rather have them direct their energies to focusing on how we can get rid of old bylaws that stop homes, how we can get the cost of a home down so people can actually live somewhere to solve that issue, than this foreign buyers ban. If we put every ounce of energy to increasing supply and choice, that'd be a much better use of government resources.
Right. So then, that kind of brings you back to Bill 23, because essentially that's getting rid of the red tape.
You got it.
Right. Now, some people may argue, well, okay, if you're getting rid of the red tape, you're getting these homes to market quicker. What about sewage? What about, these things that have been put in place, but now you're adding more density, more people into these neighborhoods? Well, I guess I'm actually adding to something else here now too, which is, you're intensifying some of these neighborhoods, right? Where you can go from a single family home to a 3 or 4 unit. What about that?
Well, yes, you have to make sure that the resources are there, the services to support any kind of growth. And the way the province should do this is to say, okay, Oshawa is playing ball. They're building more homes that we can, get more first-time buyers in the market. They're saying no to the NIMBY forces and yes to young people. They should be rewarded for that. So if their big project is, water or sewer or a road expansion or a new arena, whatever it is, that should go to the top of the list for funding. And some other municipalities says, no, we don't want to build no homes. We want our young people to move away. We're going to bow down to the NIMBY forces and close our doors. Well, their project goes to the bottom of the list. They don't get funded. That type of carrot and stick approach will reward good behavior of those building homes and support the infrastructure that we need.
Got it. Now, I work with a lot of real estate investors. I've been doing this now since 2008. And you hear some people that, well, it's the real estate investors that are driving the prices of these homes up, or these flippers are doing it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, if you're a flipper, you should pay fair taxes. What I worry about in flippers sometimes is that they pretend that's where the family lives and they really don't, and they avoid taxes. That's not fair. So you should have the appropriate treatment to make sure they play within the rules. But the bottom line here, it's a supply issue. It's like a cruel game of musical chairs. We got more and more people circling and fewer chairs for them to land on. Again, if I had my way, my message to government, whether they're at the provincial, local, or national level, focus on getting more homes built that people can actually afford. There's lots of ways of doing so. In cities, you can intensify around transit areas, even build on top of GO stations. In smaller communities, land that's not sensitive, you can turn into housing. There's a great opportunity in what we call stopping exclusionary zoning. I'll explain this for a sec. So whether you're in Oshawa or Toronto or St. Catharines, picture that wartime bungalow.
Okay.
And today you can knock down the wartime bungalow and people build a 4-story monster home.
Mm-hmm.
And we support that. That's your right. You worked hard for your money. You want to provide for your family. God bless you. But if that same investor want to knock the old home down and build a duplex or a triplex or a townhomes that could house more first-time buyers, holy smokes, they go through this ringer. The lawyers come in, all the NIMBY forces descend, fees, years of delay. And then what do? They throw up their hands and they walk away. And then those 3 or 4 families cannot get into the market. So what we say, you should have a level playing field. If you want to build up, that's your right to do so. You own the home. But if you also want to turn it into more housing for first-time buyers, you should be able to do so, especially in urban areas.
Right. And that Bill 23 does address that.
You got it. So Bill 23 does a number of very good things. They allow for more residences on a single lot, intensify along transit areas. The government's talked about putting its own money where its mouth is, so to speak, using underutilized government land and turning that into homes for first-time buyers. There's a lot to like in this legislation. There's steps they can go further, Gary, we've talked about, but it is the most pro-home ownership, pro-rental legislation that we've seen in our lifetimes.
Yeah, that's great. What about the vacant home tax? Do you think it's going to make an impact on supply?
I don't. I guess we'll see. Municipalities have this right, and a number are going in that direction. Politically, it'll be popular in the polls, but this is the way I look at it. So you're going to have some civil servants that run this program, a program where you register everybody, right? They sign up, I live there permanently, I don't. And then some way to monitor whether they actually reside in that property 6 months plus a year. So they're watching our water usage or our electricity usage. They come by and look. There'll be an appeal mechanism and all of this stuff. I don't even know if it's going to make money or lose money when you run the bureaucracy around it. I guess we'll see. But again, if you put all those people developing this program that at best I think will have a marginal impact into saying, okay, how can we find more land that can be developed? How can we get rid of some silly rules that prevent, homes from being built? I'll give you a classic example we heard about on our housing task force. This is in Toronto. It was outside of a park and they were building a high rise. And they found, Gary, believe it or not, that it cast a shadow in the park 2 days a year. 2 days a year on, I think, 10% of the park or something like that. Something to do with the solstice or the equinox. I forget which one. I got to go back to my notes. So one of those two.
Okay.
And because of the shadowing rules, they actually had to knock that whole building down by about 10 floors. 35 affordable units were lost, all over this silly rule that prevented homes people could afford from being built. I would much rather see our civil servants looking at ways to toss out outdated red tape so more homes that people can afford can get built than designing, these new schemes that I think are not going to make a big difference.
Right, because you got to think of how many people will they need to employ in this task force to monitor all of this, because it's being done through taxes as well too. Like when you're filing for your taxes of, do you have any homes that are vacant? You got to list them all, and like that's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I'm not sure everybody's going to say, oh, yeah,
No.
come tax me. I don't pay enough taxes.
Right.
Maybe some will. But you're going to have some sort of, Inspector Gadget who's going to go around and knock on doors and look through the window or look at your water usage or whatever to prove you guilty. Isn't there a better use of that government time to build more supply?
100%. I agree with you. What about the recent bank failures? What are your thoughts on that? I know they're down in the U.S., Are there any concerns that you see with SVB and all these other banks coming into Canada, or do we have a strong banking system here?
We do have a very small C conservative banking system that tends to keep us out of hot water. The downsides of the banking system means that there's less choice. If you're looking for venture capital, if you're a startup, it's harder to get. So there are downsides to restricted supply and heavy regulation. But it does actually help us to get through waves like 2008, 2009, which was devastating in the States, hit us, but not nearly as hard. And that's why I think what we've seen in the States will not impact our big banks here in Canada because of this stricter regulation. We'll keep an eye too. I mean, they do most of our big banks do own some of the smaller banks in the States, right? You see them owning branches everywhere. So we'll see if that spills up that way. But generally, we take a very cautious approach when it comes to our financial system to avoid these risks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you don't have the community banks that they have in the U.S., right? And, we got the 5 major banks up here. So a lot more heavily regulated, right?
Yeah,
to ensure
exactly.
that we've got a good banking system.
Yep. And there's pros and cons of that. But one of the big pros, it makes us much less vulnerable to these risks like we see in the States.
Yeah. But you don't see that coming up here at all. You think we're good?
Look, you always are going to, right here, right at the Real Talk headquarters, not knock on wood, but we're not seeing signs of it here in Canada. Our major banks are well secured. There's strict rules. We don't have as many small banks like they do in the States. So you always are on guard to make sure the rules are working. You check. I know the federal government has responded to making sure the banks do have liquidity in case one of these runs does happen, but does not seem to be on the radar screen anywhere like it is south of the border.
Yeah. And now I guess you're starting to see some of the big banks take little banks, right? And you got the conspiracy theorists coming out now, and this is it, and this is how they take control of all these little small guys, right? I
don't know. Who knows? Who knows? Everybody's got a conspiracy about everything. I like to think that Loch Ness Monster is alive and he's hanging out with Elvis right now.
Right.
But there's an old expression from Warren Buffett: when the tide goes out, you see who was swimming naked.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of risks taken in the States, so I think you're seeing some of that, but the Canadian rules and regulation are strict enough that does not seem to wash ashore here.
Right. Now, we touched on this a little bit earlier, and I want to kind of jump back into it. You being the CEO of OREA, and you got REBA that regulates the realtors right across Canada. Now, what about TRESA? What that's coming in? Can you talk about that and what the differences are, and what does that mean for these realtors? And I didn't say Canada, I meant Ontario.
Yeah, no problem. So REBA was brought in 2002, and you know what? I was actually the minister that did that when I was in politics. That was my baby back in 2002.
That. Okay,
I know.
I didn't do my homework. I should have looked into that. I should have known that.
Yeah, but you were back in elementary school, Gary, in 2002. How would you even remember? And it was actually groundbreaking legislation at the time. Other provinces copied it, but it is now dated.
Okay.
By way of example, the fines were set at 2002 home values.
And just to explain the difference between the two and what they are for somebody who's listening and they don't know what they are.
Basically, we're using code here. REBA, the Real Estate Business Brokers Act, and TRESA, that's the new legislation, the Trust in Real Estate Services Act. Those are the governing pieces of legislation for how real estate exchanges work in the province of Ontario.
Right.
What you can do, what you can't do, and then how the regulator goes after you if you break the rules. So I can say with full confidence that TRESA will make us North American leaders when it comes to professionalism, when it comes to ethics, and strengthening our regulator. We really pushed on this in our advocacy with government because we wanted to see 3 things. We wanted to see North American leading professional standards in consumer protection. We wanted new business opportunities for realtors to serve their clients. And third, we wanted to make sure we had a regulator who had more tools to go after bad actors. Nothing makes a realtor angrier when they see a fellow realtor rip somebody off, take advantage of them. We want them booted out of the profession, and this will give the tools to do that.
Right. And when is that supposed to be now switching over? Because I thought it was April 1st, but it looks like something's been pushed out.
Yep. So this might take a minute. Maybe I'll break this up. There are 3 phases. So phase 1 is now done. Phase 1 brought in personal real estate corporations. That's a very effective tax planning and investment tool for realtors. Mm-hmm. That was top of one of the top things on our list. So that is done. We have over 10,000 PRECs, personal real estate corporations now in the province. And to allow realtors to use new terms like realtor or real estate agent in their ads, not just sales representative, and a new code of ethics. So those 3 things were part of phase 1. Phase 2, you're right, is happening right now. It was supposed to be April 1st, but it's been pushed back a little bit, and I'll tell you why in a minute. There's some very good reasons for that. But it will bring in that open offer process that we talked about earlier on.
Right.
It'll give greater ability for the regulator to go after bad actors and get data to help pinpoint where bad actors are, bad practices, instead of a scatter gun approach. and it's going to change some of the language and some of the options in the market between, well, there's confusion between what a customer was and what a client was. So it makes some changes in those areas. There's some of the things that are in phase 2 under TRESA, and it'll be pushed back past April 1 because there's something new on the table.
Got it. Okay. And can you talk about that, something new?
Absolutely. I'm happy to talk about it.
Let's bring it out.
So there's something called designated representation that OREA went to the government to lobby for, and the government's not made a decision on it yet, but they said, okay, let's talk. And basically they decided there's no use bringing in these new rules in April 1 if we're going to bring in a whole new set in a few months' time. So let's package it all together. So what is designated representation? Well, basically today, if you've got a buyer and a seller in the same brokerage, that's multiple representation. And the REBA, which I said was back in 2002, says you've got to treat them both equally. You got to be neutral to them. And I think most consumers would say, no, I want my agent to be fighting for me, not neutral with the other guy or another buyer. So designated representation would allow a brokerage as an option to say, okay, Gary, you will be the buyer agent and you will represent and have full fiduciary duties to the buyer. And Tim, you'll be the seller agent and have full representation to that seller. The brokerage will be neutral. He'll make sure that we do our jobs. But that way you'll have an agent fully in your corner, fully responsible for advancing your cause. That's what designated representation does. They've got it in Alberta, BC, and Nova Scotia. It will be a game changer here in Ontario, be good for consumers, a new option for realtors and brokerages, and modernize the act. So basically, Rico brought this idea to government to us. We've been lobbying for it since about 2017. So we said, let's go for it. And that's why you see a delay as the government thinks through that option.
So essentially, just to break it down, you're saying that I can't represent now the buyer and the seller. Is that correct? When that comes out? Or no, is that different? Like, you know how I can now represent a buyer and a seller?
Right.
Does this designator or designation, does that get rid of that? Or no, is that different?
So no, you could still do that, right? We have fiduciary responsibility only to one of those parties.
Got it.
But this would be within the brokerage. That within a brokerage, if the brokerage chooses this model, right? They'll have an option, traditional brokerage representation or designated representation. But within a brokerage, you could designate one agent to be on the buyer side, one agent to be on the seller side, or if there's two buyers, and be fully responsible and have duties to those, because right now, under the rules, you're supposed to be neutral.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Got it. Now, with everything that's happened over the last 6-7 months with the interest rates raising as quickly as they have, this obviously had a big impact on the real estate industry. Now, how did that impact the realtors? And you may have seen this. And did some of them have to go back to their full-time jobs? What did OREA do to help those realtors during those times? Because sometimes they don't know that the help is out there. And I know that OREA provides a lot of assistance and help.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about advocacy. So let me talk about some of the other programs that we offer. We offer guidance for tricky areas, like how to conduct yourself in gray areas, emerging areas, recent legal decisions. We gave a lot of guidance when we went through the COVID slowdown. How do you operate in this environment? What are the government rules?
Yep.
And then we have standard forms. And in standard forms, your realtor audience will know this, and a lot of your investors, but that's basically the common language for realtors across the province. So they can actually, do deals. They use a standard form. And if there's any kind of problem out there, we will have a form to help solve that problem. So what we've done, we've launched, by the way, we've launched a new website, OREA.com. Encourage you to check it out. Very user-friendly, and information on there for realtors to basically deal with the different kind of real estate market we see today compared to 2022. So working with clients under these circumstances, what if the financing falls through? We give advice and forms to help realtors navigate those more challenging times. Again, they can check all that out at OREA.com.
Okay, no, that's really good. The other thing as well, too, that I wanted to touch on is, and I think we talked about this before we turned the cameras and the mics on, is benefits. And that's a scary thing for somebody who is becoming a realtor for the first time. They're working in the 9-to-5 world. They've got a great company. They've got benefits. And all of a sudden now they're an entrepreneur and boom, the benefits are gone.
And that's the risk, right? Like, realtors are independent contractors. And as such, they're not on a payroll like their neighbors may be, or their brother or sister or their cousins with guaranteed benefits. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, one fate turns against you, one string of bad luck to you or a loved one in your family, and you could be in some severe financial or health challenges. So our OREA board has said they want to make an effort here to provide a package of benefits for realtors. It would be, I think, the first of its kind in North America. We survey our members pretty regularly, and the top two issues, no surprise to you, I'm sure, Gary, and your audience, access to data across the province. So one way of getting access. And the number two was a kind of benefits program, life insurance, disability insurance, dental, medical, all of that stuff, mental health support. So the good news is we are looking at this right now. We have a Realtor Wellness Task Force that is with realtor leaders from across the province. Later this spring, we'll have more details about this. It is on the desk right now is the exciting news. We'd love to hear from realtor members about think this will benefit from them and what should be covered.
Yeah, listen, man, it's good to have a good smile.
Right? It helps.
Yeah, 5 years later, you're a realtor. You need those benefits, man. They're important.
We laugh about it, but yeah, you when you're an entrepreneur, when you're an independent contractor, I admire people that have the courage to go out, do their own thing. There's no guaranteed paycheck every day when you wake up. You don't know if that phone is going to ring or that text is going to come through, right? You rely on your great reputation, your integrity, and your hustle. We want to make sure there's a backstop there. If bad luck hits you or your family, that there's something there to get you back on your feet.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you wake up every morning unemployed, and you have to go out there and you got to find work, and so it'll definitely help to be able to have something to, have benefits for yourself and your wife and your kids or your partner and your spouse, right? So I think it's a great initiative.
Yeah, and look, one of our leaders, I'm sure, love to come on the podcast down the road when the program is ready to go and answer all the questions and tell you all about it.
Yeah, no, I would love that. Anything else that you guys are working on right now in OREA before we switch gears?
Yeah, one thing we really try to invest in is how much our realtor members give back to the community. And I can tell you this because I saw it with my own eyes, Gary. I mentioned I was 21 years in politics and I did all kinds of events. And I was always impressed that if it was the local hospital, the local food bank, the school council, you always had realtors rolling up their sleeves and getting involved. I defy you to find another profession that is actively involved in grassroots community support and fundraising like Ontario Realtors.
Yeah, and that's good to know, and I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah, it is impressive to see. Mm-hmm. So we invest in those talents. So you can take leadership programs through OREA online or in person that will invest in those skills. How to read a financial sheet. If you want to be on the hospital board, for example, good governance practices. If you want to get involved in your local real estate association with us at OREA or nationally, how do you do so? This is a great set of programs to invest in those volunteer and leadership skills to help you give back to your community and your profession.
That's amazing. So how many realtors do we have right now?
96,000 last time I counted. It's amazing how it's always a round number, eh?
Jeez, that's
96,000.
Okay.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about the market, and it certainly has come off from where it was in the frenzy this time last year, but the number of realtors has actually increased. People find it an attractive profession. They like to work in the Canadian dream, so we're up to about 96,000 in Ontario now.
Wow. So we've gone up since a year ago.
We have.
That's incredible. I thought we would have probably seen the numbers decrease. So that's interesting to know.
And you may see that depending on where the market goes in 2023. But I think many people find the notion, despite all the work you got to put up to it, just like you said, you wake up every morning unemployed. The ability to be part of the Canadian dream and put a smile on that young family's face is very compelling for a lot of Canadians. We're seeing more enroll in school.
Yeah. I want to switch gears one last time here and then we'll wrap it up. But you were the leader of the Conservative Party from 2009 to 2014, I believe.
There you did your research there. Exactly.
I did a little bit of work on that. Now, what was that like?
It was tremendously rewarding. It was I was 21 years in provincial politics, rising to become leader of the Ontario PC Party. I like to joke, Gary, that they give you shorter sentences for manslaughter or second-degree murder than that. I'm out for good behavior now. But the chance to fight for what you believe in, to fight for your community, your province, a better healthcare, education, more jobs, a functioning real estate market to provide for more homeowners. It was a compelling way to go through life. Yeah, a lot of pressure, right? You're in the bright lights on you, and you've got somebody, the politics is a bit different because imagine every day you've got somebody hanging around just telling you what a bad job that you're doing, right? Like the opposition, all that kind of stuff. But man, I wouldn't trade that time for the world, the chance to serve and fight for what you know will make us a stronger province.
Now, did you find that you lost half of your friends? Because I mean, for the most part, you know, you take a look at, you know, go right across Canada, you're about kind of 50-50. I mean, you know, obviously you get the NDP as well too. But, you know, did you find that? Because sometimes politics can be so divisive. And I think especially in today's world, and I do want to dive into that, but what was that like? You know, because once you pledge allegiance to a specific party.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you lost a friend over that, they weren't a friend to begin with.
There you go.
What I'd have to say is the answer to your question was happily no. A lot of folks I grew up with remain friends, and they might not agree with me. But there is always mutual respect, right? You just got to make sure you don't cross that line. Maybe a couple along the line, but they were not true friends to begin with. The funny story on this though is it's a different social media world. So if people would impersonate my family online, my dog was attacking me on Twitter at one time. So my dog's name was Tavish. So Tavish the dog popped up. So what a terrible owner I was. I had somebody it was pretty bad taste pretend to be my daughter criticizing me. So in the real world, friends are friends and they stick with you. In the fake Twitter world,
right.
There's a few characters that popped up to go after me.
Man, Twitter is a dangerous world. I don't really play around too much in Twitter, but man, it's so divisive. But you know what though? It feels like it's more divisive now. And is it because there's a larger wealth gap that's happening? Well, what's causing that? Or is it social media that is finding holes in that? Like there's obviously something's changed, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I do believe that there is a lot of anger and frustration, understandably so, from people who feel they've been left behind. Mm-hmm. Housing is a big part of that. Right? Every generation had a better shot at owning a home. My grandparents came here as immigrants. The first things they did was they saved up enough money to buy a house. They rented up the upstairs to help pay down the mortgage because they believed in it. It's where they raised their family, and a smart investment. So I think a lot of young people feel betrayed because that's turned upside down now. The old rule that if you worked hard, you got your degree and all that kind of stuff, you could succeed. I think that's slipping away for many Canadians. And I think that underlies a lack of trust and authority, a feeling of anger and betrayal. There's no doubt that social media will also exaggerate the differences, that it will make the world seem angrier and a bit nastier than it is. I will tell you on the positive side, though. When I would be out in my riding or out in public as PC leader, I'd be out with my wife, my kids, the vast majority of Canadians treated you very well. They gave you your space, they were polite, and even if they didn't agree with you, they were polite in approaching you. So while it may seem like that some days in the Twitterverse, I still believe the vast majority of Canadians are class X.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know because, man, it feels real divisive. And I think sometimes, you know, when you're seeing social media and you're seeing people have great things and, you know, you're looking at your life and like, well, why can't my life be like that? You know, there's animosity that happens. And then you start to not only just maybe blame where you work or your job, but then you start to blame the other side or the Liberals or the Conservatives or the NDPs. And then, you know, when you start taking a look at what's happening in the world, then you start looking and blaming other countries, you know, and it's a very, very crazy place we're at right now.
Yeah, there's a harshness to the tone and the language. But I still, so I'll say yes, in my lifetime, I think it's been more harsh, more divided. Mm-hmm. But I'll still say that the vast majority of people have both feet firmly planted on the ground, that they are decent human beings. They want the best for their families and for the province of Ontario. And what can we do in all this madness? Look, I think, quite frankly, the more people we can get settled into a home, the more people who can get into the market, the more people who can fulfill their own desire to be homeowners. And that, by the way, continues to go up, not down. I think we'll do our part in helping to settle things down.
Yeah, you know, and I agree with you there because look, what you see on social media and what you see in the real world is completely different.
Yeah.
If that was happening in the real world, there'd be people fighting in the middle of the streets, and that's not happening. Yeah. I think for the most part we are civil. I think social media really just, takes it up that extra notch, right? And it makes it feel like we're at war with each other.
You got it. And there's no place I would rather be, despite our warts and our problems, than living right here in the country of Canada.
Yeah. Listen, let's finish this on a high note. What do you think has been one of the largest contributors to your success? When it comes to where you've been able to, what you've been able to achieve in your life, because you've achieved some incredible things. What do you attribute that to?
Well, thanks. That's very, very, very kind of you to say. I think there's, when I give advice to folks, there's really three principles that I tried to follow and pave that way for success. Number one is to take risks. I think it's easy to play it safe, to be there on the sidelines. It takes guts to step forward, to volunteer and try something. And even if you fail, you gain in character and respect for trying in the first place. So number one, take risks. Number two is to just deliver good work, develop a reputation for being reliable and dependable, invest in that quality. So when you take the chance, you do your work and you do it well, you'll get more put on your shoulders. So number three is develop long lasting and trusting relationships. It is rarely worth it to burn a bridge. You never know how the world's going to turn. A former rival could become your closest ally over time. I will tell you that despite what you see in politics, which is sometimes, 2/3 theater, kind of like pro wrestling, you can, make all the noise in front of the cameras and then you go for a beer after. It's actually more like that for most politicians.
Really?
Yeah, it really is.
Okay.
And I lived that. I believed that. And I lived it because when I left politics and had the honor of serving as the CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association, I did find the door was open to me, whether it was Liberals, New Democrats, Conservatives, or Green. There was that mutual respect and collegiality. And that helped us get a lot of the good things done that we've talked about here on the program today. Because I didn't burn bridges, I kept lasting and trusting relationships, and that pays off big time.
Yeah, listen, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming in, Tim. This was a really good conversation. I think anybody that's listening will get some great advice and just a better understanding of who you are and what you've done.
Thanks, Gary. I really appreciate it. Thank you for what you do and getting the word out, the real talk here with Gary. And I don't know if I passed my audition, but I'd love to come back and we'd love to talk more about the benefit program when that's ready to put out there.
I would love for you to do that. I think that'd be great. And I've enjoyed this talk. I really have. So, Tim, great seeing you again, as always. And let's do this again.
Pleasure is mine. Continue success.
Take care.